And we're live, and welcome to another edition of Life is People. Well, tonight's the great honour to welcome back a sort of like a returning guest. So, how before we go any further, I know we touched upon it briefly before we went live, Miriam. But how are you anyway?
Well, I have to say, to start with the positives, I have a bunch of new clients and a lot of new work that is tremendously exciting. It's actually a blessing through my migraines to have something else to focus on. I finished a big segment of a very large project yesterday, doing a little jig around the house, just got so excited about it. So all that's good. As far as the migraines, the fibromyalgia, it's a day-to-day kind of effort, and you always have to be mindful of that. I had to be put on a steroid the end of last week because the migraine had gone on for 3 weeks. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't do anything, functional. Fortunately, the medication has helped, and I'm back to doing, my normal stuff, which is great. I do have something funny to show you just to get us off right. This, I don't know if you can see it. Let me hold it up so you can see it. Can you see it? A friend of mine got this from me. It says, I'm not Superwoman, but I'm fighting migraine. So same difference.
Well, I think what's really great about that T-shirt, and I think it's a really good starting point to start this conversation off with, because for many people who hear the word migraine, it's something that maybe they've heard of, and personally, I knew people experienced it when I was a child, and this is one of the things that when you start to do research on it, and it's a couple of sort of facts I want to put to you, really, and it was something that you alluded to when we first started speaking about this. One was basically about how in a broad stroke it affects women more than men, which I find is fascinating. And the second one, which kind of relates to that, was how it's genetical. And then the second bigger point really was just how many people it affected. I mean, I was sharing you this afternoon, I was reading some research, and it was 37 million people in America. Now that's horrendous. So on those 2 points, really, I mean, sort of like the fact that migraine's been around, particularly around the female and genetic. Was this for you personally? Would those things stand true? And was this something that goes back in your family line? And was this something you've known since a child, and it's just got progressively worse or better?
Yes. As a child, I had episodic migraines. Episodic means you have less than 15 a month, that they don't last, for days on end. Usually, they're more easily treatable with medication. For me, aspirin was always enough to at least touch the migraine, if not get rid of it. Growing up, and this is where a lot of the women come in, migraines can be triggered hormonally due to the menstrual cycle. And so I suffered from menstrual migraines every 2 weeks, like clockwork. I would have, I'm sorry, I can't meet you that day. I'm going to have a migraine. It was like clockwork. And then that stopped, and I was, oh, great. And then I got slammed about 20 years ago, and the episodic turned into chronic, which means that you have more than 15 migraine days a month. And it's much harder to treat. It becomes so entrenched that your life becomes migraine and how to deal with it. And compounding it for me is fibromyalgia, which has been shown to trigger migraines. And in my case, the areas in the back of my neck here, which are extraordinarily tender, can shoot the pain up into the head, trigger the migraine, and then I'm stuck with both aspects of the pain and trying to deal with it. Despite all of these numbers, though, the World Health Organization classifies it as the 19th most debilitating disorder in the world. It is still considered an invisible illness. And that means that you can't see it. It's not like a broken leg where you say, oh, yeah, somebody's in a cast. Okay, they can't walk, or they're in a wheelchair or something like that. This is not something that other people can see unless they know you well and can see the signs of migraine on your face, or you tell them you have a migraine. But people don't see, so they dismiss it. They don't believe it's true. They believe you're faking it. You're trying to get out of work. You're trying to, whatever you're trying to do. So, and there's a large stigma still attached to it. You don't tell people you've got migraines because, oh my God, then, you know, they're going to treat you differently. They're not going to hire you because they don't want to deal with your pain and your days off and your problems with work and whatever. I've been very fortunate in that I have clients who either have migraines themselves or are very familiar with a disorder. And I've been able to work out schedules that allow me to both work and deal with a migraine and hopefully not trigger additional migraines. But it is a huge worldwide problem that absolutely must be addressed. There are preventives, there are treatments, but it's still an ongoing, area of research. A lot is not known about it, and that makes it even harder to diagnose and to treat properly.
Well, I can imagine, and I've never suffered from, well, knowingly suffered from a migraine in my life, but I'll just give you just a personal reflection, and I've had broken bones before. I broke both my ankles before. I've had many kind of scrapes with with life and pain and stuff, but nothing. I mean, I once had a wisdom tooth went, and I was living down in Argentina at the time, and we didn't have great medical facilities. And I tell you, the pain. I remember that night because I remember having a pain in the side of my head, and you can ask my dearly beloved. I mean, that night I would have, if you'd given me a knife, I would have ripped the side of my, because it felt like there was just a huge growth or something. It must, So I can understand just a little bit of what that like, because I think there's nothing that compares to nerve pain, nothing at all. I think it's at the height of the pain and excruciation, personally. But the question that really kind of wants to lead into this, I mean, how long will a general episode of migraine last? Does it last a day? I mean, are they regular? Are they always the same length of time?
No, they're not the same length of time. Every migraine is a unique experience. So I should distinguish, there are two types of migraines. There are migraines with aura and migraines without aura. Now, my mother, you speak of genetics, my mother also has migraines, as does my sister. So we know it's genetic, and both of my grandmothers had migraines. So it comes from both sides of the family. My mother often got auras, but didn't get hit with a pain. An aura is a visual or other sensory disturbance that comes before the pain hits. So she sees like zigzag lightning bolts, or things get, they go very wavy. You can't see straight, you're not processing. There was a very well-known example of a sportscaster. She was on the air and was talking gibberish, literally gibberish. They thought she was having a stroke, and it was a migraine aura. Once the aura can take about 20 minutes, a half an hour, then the pain phase moves in. The pain can last generally from 4 hours to 72 hours. If you take an abortive medication, as many of us do, you try and get it as quickly as possible after the migraine starts, because once it's entrenched, it's almost impossible to get rid of. The medication stops working. So I personally don't get an aura, but I do get what's known as prodrome, which is the phase that comes before the active pain phase. So I'll start yawning a lot. I'm not tired. It's not in response to anybody else yawning. I'll just start yawning a lot. I'll start feeling a little out of sorts. These are all clues that say, uh-oh, migraine's coming, better take the abortive. But with each person, the experience is different. And if you look at any of the migraine sites and people talking about it, people have different triggers for what causes a migraine, how long it lasts, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. It's really an individual experience.
So I'd imagine one of the unseen consequences of migraines must be it's like a lot of things in life. I mean, there's the angle of the people like yourself who are having to suffer this, for want of a better word. But there's also the other side, which is, I suppose, again, I wouldn't imagine it's spoken upon a lot, but there's people like your partner and people who have to live with people who have this. Because as much as it's debilitating for you, it must be horrific for someone who loves someone with all their heart, and then watching them go through all that pain, and there's knowing nothing you can do. And equally, it's just again, it must be something I imagine. I thought today when I was talking about this, and was thinking, it must do emotionally, the strain in your mental health must be ridiculous, because like you say, you especially if you've got someone around you that's, if you're lucky, you're fortunate to have someone around you that loves you and they're dealing with all this. But I can imagine if you're by yourself, or if you're an old person, or again, what it must be like as a child. I mean, I can't imagine what it'd be like as a young child, and you don't know what's going on, and suddenly you just confronted with this. So there's always other sides. So the point I'm trying to lead to is, what advice would you give for someone who's obviously experienced this for many years? What would be your advice to people who maybe know people in their lives and have to live with them? I mean, what kind of advice from someone who's going through would you recommend that people from maybe up my side would say, okay, well, these are the best things to do, because I think it's always difficult to know, because we don't know where you want to encroach or where do you want to leave them alone. So what would be your, I mean, I'm sure, and maybe just to clarify that, I'm sure that people who live with people, on a daily basis have their own coping mechanisms, but I'm talking about on a general wider society. We may know people in our general circles, and like you say, in workplaces and stuff like that. So what would be, from someone like I'm saying, from someone who's who suffers it and in that situation, what would be your general kind of broad brush advice to people to the outside, to how to cope, how to sort of approach people like this?
Do not tell me it's just a headache, take an aspirin, you'll be fine. Okay? Migraine is a neurological disorder. Okay? It is not just a headache. There are many brain transmitters involved. There's dilation of blood vessels. There's a whole host of physiological responses that are going on in the person's body. This is not something under their control. So making them feel like they're less of a person because they can't just buck up and, do the work or whatever is not very helpful. Asking, what can I do? What do you need? And if the person says, leave me alone, or shut the lights off, put drapes over the windows and leave me alone for 3 hours, do it. Because the person themselves knows pretty much what's, what they need. But again, there's a stigma attached with it, so people don't, they think that you're just slacking off. They think that, well, it's just a headache. And education is a very, very important part of the process. These are my trusty little sunglasses. I wear them inside and out because sometimes the light from like a fluorescent light or whatever, or even the sunlight is way too strong, will trigger a migraine, will prolong a migraine. And I just have to let people know, the glasses are not for you, they're for me. Just accept it and move on. But trying to get people, finding a little bit of literature And there are sites that you can go to that are designed for spouses and partners and friends of people who suffer from migraine, that will detail what you can do. Everything from darkening the lights to maybe making a cup of tea to adjusting the blankets to, because often people get very cold, their extremities become cold. So making sure that they're warm enough, making sure that they have their medications available within easy reach, making sure they don't drive while they have a migraine. Things like that are very, very important. So I think really it's a question of getting the word out, letting people know what is migraine, because many people are of the opinion it's just a headache, it's just pain, it'll go away, and it's some of the most excruciating pain you'll ever feel, and you can't think when you've got one. You can't think straight. So you need somebody to kind of step in and say, and manage the situation. Say, okay, you can lay down, I'm going to do this, we'll get this all settled, whatever, later. If you need to go home, you're in the workplace, you need to get home, you can make up the hours another time. Educate people. Don't be afraid to tell your boss, I have migraines. Please understand, here's a pamphlet that explains what it is, and here's a list of what I need when this happens. And if we can agree upon these terms, then we can work successfully together. It is possible to do that. But again, everybody involved needs to be aware of what it means to be going through this process.
I agree completely, Miriam, and I think it's like one of these things in many things in life. I think it's one of the things that these are great conversations to have, because it's I think as much as getting out on a widespread scale, I think like a lot of things, I think a lot of change can happen just opening conversations between groups of friends and having that word to mouth education. But I think the other one that's very I think it's taking absolutely fascinating strides down to what you've just spoken upon, because I think there's one thing in reading something, there's one thing in watching something, there's one thing in listening to something, but I think the roads, the in-tracks that we're making into like virtual reality. I mean, I was just in doing research into this conversation, and there's already people are doing virtual reality, and you can put the goggles on and experience what it's like to have a migraine. And I'm sure that it's not exact, and I'm sure they're giving you but hey, anything like you said that's going to educate people. And because that's what I love about technology, because and the way that the technology goes is anything that gives you more of a empathetic state, or where you can gain compassion. So I can understand what it's like, rather than just reading it in a book or listening to someone talk about it. It's like I can actually experience, because that will only be a good thing. Now, one of the things, again, one of the questions that I've been asked to ask you really was, and on a general level, like you were speaking upon, it seems to be genetic and stuff. But is a migraine something? And I was asked this just today. Is this something that can come on the inset? On when a woman goes through menopause, can this become like a thing that happens through stages in life, or is it? Oh, it can.
Okay. It can. Migraines are not consistent throughout a person's life. As I said, I had episodic migraines as a child. I knew how to best get through them, and then they were gone. And then the next one would come whenever it came. I couldn't predict, but it has transformed from the time I was 6 or 7 and getting these episodic migraines to when I was in my 20s and was getting hormonal migraines, to where I am now, or for the last 20 years, where it's become chronic. And I've sought treatment at some of the biggest headache centers in the country, looking for answers for how to treat the migraine, how to reduce the frequency. And there are many, many possibilities. Unfortunately for me, almost every single one doesn't work or comes with a very bad consequence. such as one of the latest approved treatments, preventive treatments for migraine, is Botox. And what they do is they inject in the back of the head, in the occipital region, and down into the neck, where the muscles, the trapezius muscle, which often shoots the pain up into the head, they inject it once every 3 months with Botox. The problem with me is that the shots made it worse and the Botox didn't help. So my muscles were kind of paralyzed for 3 months at a time. And sometimes they tell you you have to try 3 or 4 or 5 times before it's going to work. But I've tried it 4 times. No positive result. I know other people who say, oh my God, it saved my life. You know, so it really, again, it depends on the person, their physiology, how they respond to medications. I respond very poorly to medications as a rule. I get side effects where people don't. I get side effects off an aspirin, you know, which is ridiculous. But again, in the as far as Botox is concerned, the physical act of the injection would trigger the migraine, and then I'd be caught with muscles that couldn't work to overcome the migraine because they were paralyzed by the Botox, and I just have to wait until that all passed and then try and deal with the migraine that I still had. So, you know, it really depends, and people lose their migraines. Some people who have even chronic migraines eventually find a treatment regimen that works for them, and learn what their triggers are and avoid them. And that helps a lot. They find a treatment or a doctor who is not only sympathetic, but also knowledgeable. You shouldn't go to just any doctor. You need to go to a headache specialist. And there are headache clinics all around the world. I know we have a number of them here in the States. The one I went to was in Philadelphia, called the Jefferson Headache Center. There's a big one out in Cleveland. There's one at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. One site that I've been to comes from Australia. I know they have a big center down there. The gentleman who was talking about it actually last year ran the first Migraine World Summit. He got doctors from all over the world who are headache specialists in one form or another to talk about migraine, to talk about prevention, to talk about treatment, to basically educate people going through it and other people as to what was involved and how they could stay relatively migraine-free. That summit is available for purchase should anybody be interested. I can provide you with a link that you can put out. It's migrainepal.com. The gentleman's name is Carl Cincinnato, and I know he's planning a second summit for this year, which is free to the public. You just have to show up when the speakers are talking.
Perfect. Well, I kind of like, with all conversations, I like to, you know, kind of really throw a question into the mix that kind of,
Okay.
you know, I kind of stretch you really. And my question around this would be, say, you know, we take the progression of where we go with, you know, with science and innovation with medical techniques and, you know, things like CRISPR. I mean, they're manipulating DNA. So, I mean, but my question to you is, if we do get to a point, X amount of years down the line, where we as a species can eliminate the actual cause of this, would that be something that you would desire? Would that be something you would say, oh, okay, we should eliminate that from, you know, from the human genome as such? Or do you think there's as much as it's suffering and pain, that it's actually intrinsically part of the human experience? And I know that's really difficult, because it's like someone who's suffering, you'd be like, yeah, get rid of it. But I'm not saying we should inflict people with it. But the question is, it's like, if we had the opportunity, do we eliminate it, or do we? I mean, that's a very, very philosophical question. But
it is. Pain as a whole, just the general response of pain is usually a warning signal. You have pain when you touch a hot surface. That means don't touch. You're going to burn yourself. If you feel pain after bumping yourself, it's like, okay, don't go there because you're going to injure yourself. I have never found one thing about a migraine that is beneficial. It is basically the brain gone haywire. It's processing pain signals that don't exist. The brain has been so conditioned to pain, and this happens in fibromyalgia as well. The brain becomes so conditioned to pain that your stomach gurgling, it says, oh, pain, okay, and it just jacks up your level of pain. So there's no real benefit to having a migraine. It's not warning you about anything. It's not telling you that anything is inherently wrong or that you're going to do something really stupid. It's just the brain gone haywire. And if there were a way to simply erase a migraine, for good and for all for the human species, I would say let's do it. Let's do it. There's no reason to keep people suffering. None that I can see.
Okay, well, on that one, before we do sort of wrap this up, I mean, on a general level, I mean, you obviously you mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation about how widespread this is, and so generally, and again, and I'm not trying to put things into competitions, but there's a lot of spoken about like breast cancer and and Alzheimer's and all these things have very and I'm not trying to sort of denigrate those. So, but on a wider cause, so say someone listens to this conversation, or just generally, what can people do with their, I mean, we've spoken about how if they know anybody in their circumstances, how they can treat them, from a human level. But is there any particular organisations or research that people can maybe send resources to, or give? Okay, well, please highlight them.
The Migraine Research Foundation. They've got their headquarters in New York. They are the ones that fund the research into migraine preventives and abortives and understanding of the underlying brain chemistry. So I would highly recommend just Googling Migraine Research Foundation, and you'll get right to them. I myself contribute to them because I'm very interested in seeing what the research is, where we're headed. Have they found anything new that we might be able to use to at least decrease the severity of migraines or decrease the frequency of migraines? Anything toward that end is helpful. So I would say that would be a first place to go if you're interested in the overall picture, and you can't do anything in your immediate environment, but you want to help eradicate migraines, or at least understand them to the point where we can work towards eradicating migraines. The Migraine Research Foundation would be probably the best place to start.
Well, perfect. I'll put that links into every thread that goes up when we post this out. Okay. But just before we do wrap this up, Miriam, I mean, in for maybe people listening, how would you kind of surmise this in maybe one paragraph to wrap this whole conversation up with, maybe the takeaway kind of leaving the thought process you would leave, like someone to be left with?
Migraines are real. They are debilitating. People are not faking it. They are truly suffering to different degrees, but every person is different, so every person's what they consider their limit or their threshold or whatever is different. The thing to do is to become educated so that you can help. Educated so that we can erase the stigma of an invisible illness, so that people will come forward and say, hey, I have migraine. What can I do about it? How can I help? If we can speak more openly about these things, there is more of a chance that we can make actual results in treating and preventing the migraines from happening.
Well, perfect. And as always, it's been an insightful conversation, and I kind of like I said before we went live. We'll have to again make this another conversation, maybe some sort of time in the near future, because I'm so excited, and I know I don't want to sort of go into this now. We'll leave it for a future conversation, but the progress you've been making with Ace Reader has been astounding, and I've been it's just been absolutely just watching the progress since our last conversation. So that's going to be a conversation that again we'll have to arrange, because there's so many questions about Ace Reader. So
yeah, but I just finished a new test set for the program. So there'll be new content coming very, very soon.
Well, that's perfect. Well, like I said before, I want to thank you for your time, and I know, cause especially how precious our time is tonight and stuff. But thank you very much for your time, and
thanks for having me.
It's been a great and insightful conversation. Well, for me, all the way from here in Scotland and all over there in America, it's life is people.